Pod on Lansdowne here with a special guest. First time we've done an interview in a little bit. Towards the start of the year, we were doing some interviews. Brought Ben Porter on a couple weeks ago. But now we're joined by the Boston Globe's very own Julian McWilliams. Julian, thank you so much for taking some time out of your day, man, to speak with us. We love having you on.
No worries, man. No worries. A hilarious TikTok.
I was trying to remember off the top of my head what the TikTok was because I think Liam tweeted it. Do you remember which one it was off the top of your head?
It was the one where he said who's the hottest Sox player.
Oh yes, yeah, the guy outside there on Lansdowne Street, yeah.
And that tool bag was just like, God,
yo, put you in the face. Like how insecure do you have to be, right? Like not for how do you not look into the eyes? I mean, you working on the beat. I don't know how you wouldn't faint every time you look into the eyes of Xander Bogaerts. I mean, that man is dreamy. Are you kidding me?
The handsome guy, man. I mean, Aruba, island vibes, always never panicking. That's Xander, man. He's a cat.
He's what, he speaks like 5 different languages. There's gonna be some romance
anywhere. If in my single days, I would love to have him as my side.
I know, right? Absolutely. The romance languages in there. He'd definitely be able to spit some game, multiple different languages, you name it.
Exactly.
But no, yeah, you came into the DMs there saying it was a good video. Then we decided to have you. We asked if you wanted to come on, and you were game enough to come on. So again, thank you very much, man.
Yeah, no worries. I know how much you guys put into what you guys do in terms of like having other jobs and still having the passion to talk about Red Sox. That takes a lot of work. So kudos to you guys because a lot of people can't do that. So yeah.
I appreciate it, and especially when the team isn't playing as hot to keep doing it week in week out to try to take some time.
It makes it tough.
Well, speaking about passions, man, like just looking into your background, it's riddled with baseball stuff. For people who may not be aware, why don't you kind of take us back a bit and explain how you got to this point working the beat at Fenway with the Sox?
Yeah, so it's crazy actually. So back in 2002, I don't know if you guys remember, it was the year. I played in the League World Series, and we lost to Worcester on a walk-off home run. I still remember the kid's name, Brian Griffin. And,
not the dog from Family Guy, a different Brian Griffin.
yeah. And we lost on a walk-off home run in the United States semifinal. We were a year after Danny Almonte. We were a team from New York. And so I've always remembered Worcester. And then the minute I move up here, I'm like, dang, shit. This is the very first sign I see is Worcester, Boston. I'm like, oh, my gosh, this is going to haunt me for years.
Opens up the wound again,
Yeah, absolutely opens up the Little League wound. So, I went to started at Ohio University, played there, was on baseball scholarship, transferred to Temple, played there for a bit, and then played professional independent baseball, and then sort of wanted to stay in the game, wanted to stay around baseball. So originally I thought I was going to try to, work in somewhere in baseball operations, somewhere like that. But it just wasn't necessarily my suit. I interned at MLB.com, and stuff like that. And I just didn't really see myself in a baseball operations role. So I, went back into what my major was, journalism. And I sort of grinded from the bottom in terms of like trying to get back. And I was like, looking up, I didn't get my first gig really like in sports like until like I was 26, and I was working at a local newspaper in Greenwood, South Carolina, which is actually like 50 minutes from Greenville, where the Sox have their
the drive,
the drive. So I was covering like high school sports and some Clemson stuff, but mainly high school and like local college sports. The Athletic popped up. I knew somebody. I knew Mark Spears, the NBA writer, and he knew somebody at the one of the people from the Athletic, and he's like, "Hey, would you be interested?" And I'm like, "Absolutely," because I was sort of fine with going the route of like just covering college next. I was fine with going the route of just doing the next steps in terms of just covering anything. And then I ended up getting that job just because I think partially luck, because it was a startup, something new. They wanted somebody young. It was an A's beat, that was necessary. Nobody really watched, so it was kind of low stakes. So that's how I ended up in baseball. Then this job came up, kind of unfortunately because Nick Cafardo passed.
Right.
And I actually told I think it was Gary Washburn, who covers basketball for us, texted me and was like, "Hey, would you be interested? Pete Abraham's getting moved up to the columnist role, and we need a beat writer." And I'm like, I don't know, like I guess. And he was like, "Dude, like these jobs don't come around often. Like, I think you should hop on it." And I'm like, "Yeah, right. It gets me back home, closer to the East Coast. Closer to New York." I was like, "Yeah, I don't know what I was thinking, not necessarily, but." I didn't necessarily think I had a chance at it. So I went in with the idea of like, yeah, I'll talk to these people. I'll like
throw your hat in the ring, see what happens, right?
And then by like the third or fourth interview, when they brought me like here actually to interview, I'm like, dang, I think I might have a good shot at getting this. So I think that's part of the reason why I landed the job is that I went in with the idea of like, yeah, this is just going to be, I guess, just like a way for me to strengthen my resume, strengthen my contact or something like that. I didn't necessarily think I was going to get it until I got deep into the process and I was like, oh shit. So that's kind of where I landed. And I've been here since 2019, right before the London series is when I got here. So I got here. They're like, hey, you're going to London in 3 days. And I'm like, all right. And then that year was a whirlwind, man. That was a year like Dombrowski got fired. They had the Cora stuff happen. Like Heim comes in. Like it was a lot for me to process that year, man. Then the following year, like COVID hits. So this is actually like my real first year, I feel like, of being able to like have everything sort of back to normal, because even last year it wasn't back to normal. Weren't able to go to clubhouses. I was having a baby who was born like when Christian Vasquez hit his walk-off home run. So I'm looking at my phone while my wife is like, she's like, you better put that phone down. So, yeah. Man,
did you put the phone down? That's the most important thing. Smart. There you go. That's good.
The wall, and I put the phone down. So
absolutely.
But yeah, man. So that's kind of how I got here. It's been a sort of a long journey. So that's why I tell a lot of people, especially like they're coming up, and like it's like it just takes one person, like any team. Like it takes one team to like you. It takes one person like you. Because I was 26, like just getting my career started, and then kind of things just happen quickly after that. So yeah, that's sort of my journey here.
A life full of baseball, and I didn't know the Little League World Series bit. I've always wanted. I've obviously other questions regarding all that, but I did want to go back to what I guess the best way to even put that. I know this is a cliche way of asking questions, but what is that even like being a Little League World Series player? Like, what is that entire experience? It's just running around from place to place in between games. That had to have been the thrill of a lifetime for any kid that age. That follows baseball would love to be in that spot.
Dude, we were. I don't know if we were the good examples, man. Like, cause like we were crazy, man. Like we had groupies. Like we had we had like, and like they were older than us too. They were like 15, and they used to come to our games, like come to our practices, like, and we used to take advantage of it. Like we were crazy. Like the
status,
like now where people would go with that, like they can wander with their heads, but like we were some crazy 12-year-olds. Like it wasn't like your normal team just happy to be like, no, like we were there, like, and we were there. Like it was
hot shit, right? Right, absolutely.
Yeah, it was wild, man. It was fun. It happened so quick. Like our team had never won the district, and that was in part because Danny Almonte and them were there. They've been cheating for years. Like,
oh, really? That was a long thing.
Players from Dominican Republic, like he wasn't the only 14-year-old on that team. Like there were probably like 5 or 6 guys. He was the headline guy, and so we could never win our district because they were in our district. And then they get banned from our district, and we were like, okay, we just want to win the district, and because our league had never ever won a district title ever, and then we won district, and then we won the section, and then my mom had to keep taking off work. My dad was the coach. My mom was telling her bosses, like, they'll probably get knocked out this round. And I was like, no. Then we won state, and then we won regional. And then we were at the Little League World Series, like, holy shit, like, we can possibly do some work in this thing. And it just happened so quick. but it kind of screws with your mind a bit because like it happens quick, then it's over, right? Like
No, yeah,
it's like, and then like you go back home, and like your love for like I guess maybe a month or so, like doing this, doing that, and then you're back to being normal again. This is back to being a normal kid.
back to doing pre-algebra homework. Yes.
Exactly. So like it kind of screws with your mind a little bit in terms of like thinking of like who you really are versus like who you really are. It's like really like 5 minutes of fame and that's it. So um but it was awesome, man. It was a cool experience just being around those different teams. Like if you've ever been to the League World Series, like I recommend everybody to go because it's an awesome experience. Like
Yeah.
everything's free there. Like it's like it's top notch. So
Yeah. All the games are from a buddy of mine has been a couple times. He says all the games are
it's
free.
awesome,
It's
man.
you kind of just walk in, walk out at your
Walk
own.
around, wander, and do whatever you want. Like it's awesome. Yeah. Like so, and I mean I always grew up watching it, but I never thought like we would be the team to sort of play in a Little League World Series. I always just thought we would just be like, we'll win our district and that'll be it. But I mean, it was cool. It was really really cool.
No, absolutely. And then you mentioned playing in college and playing professionally. Now, as your current gig being a beat writer, and over the last couple of years, whether it's with the A's or with the Red Sox, do you think that experience being a player over the years at multiple different levels that most people don't even get a chance of, even sniffing playing professionally or college ball, do you think that helps in your career there, like asking questions, forming stories, things like that?
Yeah, I definitely think it does, especially like it does. But I think it takes me back to something. It was easier earlier because I was closer to it. I was closer to those feelings of like what it felt like to be a player. Um, and I never forget like Joe Panic, who I grew up with. We grew up playing together, and he's from New York. We grew up playing, and I remember I was in a clubhouse in Scottsdale, Arizona, in my first year covering the beat. Yeah, 2018. He said like it's easier to like the further you get away from the game, the harder it is for you to like empathize with like why do you swing at that? Why do you do this? Why do you do that? So like now, like I find myself like having more so my journalist hat on. I'm like, oh, what was he swinging at? Not being able to empathize because I haven't been around it
Right.
since 2014, right? So I haven't seen a slider which I chase outside the zone and like and I'm definitely not seeing sliders of what they're facing. So I have to put myself back in those spaces and like so I've made it a point for myself like even this offseason, my buddy he's a hitting coach down in Atlanta, and my other buddy is a fielding coach down in Atlanta, and they have some of like the top players, and I'm like, dude, I just got to be around them in the game and hear them talking from a coach and an attack perspective for me just to for me to get back into that to more so that mindset. But to answer your question, I think it does. I think it definitely does. I think it helps that I played against a lot of players that I played against Hosmer. I played against a lot of players that are still in the league. I'm still younger. That helps. So yeah, I definitely do think it helps, but I think it's easier. But I have to make sure like to keep it, to stay close to it, so it remains that way. Because I mean, what these guys do is hard, man. Like it's hard to be like, say even Jaron Duran coming up here and hitting for 4 weeks and sucking for the next.
Yeah. He has been the topic of this program on many occasions, Mr.
Yeah,
Duran.
and everybody's like, "What the hell is wrong with this guy?"
Yeah.
Dude, this shit is hard. Like,
It is easy to get swept up in that, just this player hasn't done anything, for 2 weeks. But
right.
it sounds cliche, but you really do get even just, if you're sitting a couple rows off the field or something like that, or even just being at Fenway for a game, wherever, you really don't get an appreciation for how fast even 93 is nothing nowadays.
Yeah.
Someone throws 93, right? That's like that. You know what I mean? Going against like a splitter from Frankie Montas, like that's unhittable. It's impossible to hit.
It's ridiculous. It's ridiculous, and guys are getting stronger and stronger and faster. And it's like now you're asking guys to react to that, and it seems like pitching is so much like further ahead than hitting right now. Like pitching will always be ahead of hitting, but like the amount of technology, the correct technology that's within pitching that people are getting right, pales in comparison to like hitting. So it's these guys just have it hard, man. It's a grind, but like I do feel like, just in terms of like posing a question or maybe even like noticing certain nuances in the game, certain swings and stuff like that. Because like I wasn't the best. Like I worked my ass off to get to like be a okay hitter, right? And I think
Hmm.
it sometimes it got to it. I didn't focus on fielding as much, and it's sort of like reverted. I used to be a really good fielder, then I started focusing too much on hitting and stopped focusing on fielding, and it was like that part started my game started really lacking. So I put a lot of work into hitting, like a lot of time into hitting. So like when I asked JD a question about something about hitting, like sometimes JD has this thing where he's like, man, I don't know, like it might be too deep philosophical. Like you guys won't understand it. And I'm like, nah, bro, like shoot it my way. Like I'm pretty sure if I can't understand it, you can explain it to me to where I can extend to where I can understand it. Because I mean, I spent hours and hours and hours of like time trying to learn to compete and trying to learn to hit. And it's become a passion of mine to talk about, even dating back to my days with the A's and talking about Jed Lowry with like, he talks about hitting a lot in certain sort of not in the same ways that JD talks about it, but like he's very, very pointed in the way he talks about hitting. And like me and him used to always have these conversations about, hitting all the time. And I just love hitting. So that's, that's where it becomes easy for me in terms of doing stuff like that, because I feel like that's my sort of my lane of
Right.
where I'm best. Yeah.
And that kind of goes into a general point that I have too, and I'm sure you do. Just hearing you talk about it, you hearing your passion about it, I'm sure you feel the same way. Just anything baseball related, just like 2 or 3 baseball guys, just like capital B, capital G, baseball guys talking about baseball, talking shop about the game. I could listen to that for 10 hours straight. Just
Yeah.
there was a clip a couple years ago during the postseason coverage for Fox. It was Frank Thomas, it was A-Rod, and it was Pete Rose, who's an asshole, but he's still obviously an amazing hitter. And it was just, I think they weren't live, but the cameras were still rolling, and they were just kind of talking about like their 2-strike approach, like how they kind of dig into the box, and just all this little minutia stuff. I could listen to that for hours, and I would imagine you. And I was a freaking duster, like playing. You know what I mean? I played up until like mid high school, early or mid middle school, early high school or so. And I wasn't that great at any point. So for you, someone who was accomplished, who was able to make it to a pretty damn high level, to be able to go into that minutia, to be able to go into the nitty gritty of hitting, that's got to be that's just got to be so cool. And again, anytime baseball guys start talking shop, it's very fascinating.
Yeah, it's funny. One of my buddies, one of my best friends, he grew up in like a very like a martial arts family, and so
Right.
like he's really really into like jujitsu and all this other stuff, and like he's into like he's and so if you start like he doesn't really even know anything about baseball, but like if you start talking to him about process like of something, how you got to somewhere, how you got to point A to point B, because if you know like jujitsu, it's like okay, it's like a chess move. Like how do I counter this? How do I how to do that? And it's all like a process. So if you get him like on the process of something, like the process of hitting, I was showing him a video of like Mark DeRosa. He was locked in because he's
Yeah.
focused on the process of something. So I'm always fascinated with like the process of like how was this built? How do you get here? How did you construct this? And like where'd you go wrong with it? Where do you think you can do better? Um, and so I think it's sort of touch and go, because like a lot of hitters don't like giving that information because they're paranoid, right? They're like, oh, you write something, then
Someone's going to adjust to that, right? Yeah, exactly.
just that. It's like, dude, I'm just talking about your back foot. Like it's fine. But I get it, because so much goes. I have empathy for that, because like so much goes into that process. So like to your point, like yeah, you might not have played past like middle school, high school, but like so what? Like you're a fan of the game, like you're a fan
Yeah.
of the process of things. And I think that's the most fascinating part of everything is like, dude, like how did you get to this process of being the hitter that you are? How did you get to the process of doing the things that you do at the plate or your routine or whatever? Like talk to me about that. I'm not necessarily interested in the result or something. We're interested in the process. So like that's what fascinates me and gets me excited to even talk to somebody like a Tristan Casas on a daily basis, because I know he's a very, very process oriented guy who's very, very open about his process. So that can make my job a lot more exciting, I think, when I have somebody like that in the clubhouse who is able to be able to speak on that level, because it's like, how do you get to being great? And I think that's what it comes down to with all of this. It's like, how do you get to how do you get to doing what I can't do, and being in the top 1%? It's not being me being trying to be combative or anything like that. It's like, no, I just want to know, how do you get to doing this? And so, yeah, and it's fascinating, man, because if you get a player going on something, a lot of times they can, they'll go, and it just makes for a lot better story and things.
No, 100%. And you mentioned Casas. That's an interesting time to kind of get into his method, how he plans on taking the next step as a hitter now, just being called up now, tearing it up in Worcester, starting to find his footing here in Boston going forward. Just to hear about all that kind of again, that's just all sort of fascinating stuff there. I wanted to ask you this. You mentioned working with the A's, and you also said 2022 being back to a relative normal after the last couple of years, up and down, whether it has to do with COVID or just the Red Sox operations in general. Obviously, last year was a wild ride for the team. And then you mentioned, obviously, the working conditions just based on the situation of the pandemic. I'm curious, some similarities and differences of working in the Bay with the A's as a beat writer there compared to Boston. Maybe, what you learned maybe in Oakland that is kind of translated here, or something that just is completely different compared to being a beat writer in Oakland.
Dude, it's completely different.
Night and day.
The same. Like I like the only thing I can draw on is like the managers. Like you have two really good managers that are really, really good with media. Really, really good. Know what their job is, and they give information in terms of like like baseball. They're baseball guys, and I think all managers are baseball guys. But I think I've lucked out in having two of them that are that sort of understand what the job is and understand what their role is. Neither of them are really good. Cora or Bob Melvin weren't really good baseball, weren't really that great in the league, but still grinded out 10 plus year careers. So I think those guys have a different perspective on things. So I think if there's one thing I had to draw on, it would probably be just the managers and just how they're really good at breaking down hitters, giving out information in terms of what's going wrong with this guy, what's right with this guy, and sort of the scope of the league. I think that's something that I really don't take for granted. But in terms of everything else, man, it's way different. I was never I wanted to get back to this market, obviously, because New York, Boston, these are the two top markets I think for sports. I don't necessarily consider LA in there. It's not as, you don't feel it as much, right? And I think Mookie said it even when a guy tried to draw comparisons between the Dodgers Giants series, when he's like, do you think this has potential to become a Yankees Boston rivalry? And he's like, nah, man, those guys, that one is just straight up mean. It's no way. And you can tell Mookie was trying to be nice about it, but if you were trying to ask him about the record, he'd be like, that guy's yeah, no freaking way. That's one of one. So I came to a place where I'm it's one of one, right? And I went from a place that had zero media coverage, really. It was three of us there, on 3 or 4 of us there on a daily basis, constant. Yeah. And where players didn't hide, they were at their lockers because nobody necessarily really wanted to talk to them. You had your players like Matt Chapman, who was obviously known to would always obviously grow up to be a star and stuff like that. And Matt Olson was always great. Matt Chapman can kind of be was a little I guess was a player that you could say, okay, yeah, he could be in the Boston market in terms of nah, man, I don't have time today. I'm about to go hit or this and that. He's kind of but he would always give you time. But yeah, but in terms of just. I mean, Matt, compared to even a lot of these guys, it's different, man, because they're being bombarded all the time. So I walked in the clubhouse and I'm like, geez, there's 30 reporters.
I was going to ask how many, I was going to guess 25 guys,
25,
30 people, Yeah.
For a New York series, forget about it. It's nuts. And for both sides. So you have people that all the teams travel here. For the most part, the beat writers, this has been a little bit different this year, but the TV's travel, everybody, it's an actual beat, and there's actual I wouldn't say you feel the competition on the beat too, right? In Oakland, yeah, you felt it with Susan Slusser, Jane Lee, obviously, and Martin Gallegos. But like here, it's just different in terms of just the feeling. Like you just get an overall feeling of like, okay, this is the big leagues versus the A's. It was like it kind of felt like the minor leagues at times. Like it didn't feel like a big league team. Like I mean, even like and then I think it had to do with like the California vibe too, because like you would see Billy Beane walk around like with his dog with his shoes off on the on the field, and it's like just, oh yeah, it's my dog Cooper, and I'm like, okay, like that's different, but like that's just their MO. It doesn't say they work any less, so
right,
like,
yeah,
that's just their vibe. And so, but you would never see Chaim Bloom walk around with his shoes off and like his dog on the field here. Like it's just not happening.
yeah.
So it's a different type of vibe that happens out there. Here's a little bit more contentious, a little bit more competition, and obviously I think it's great though because it keeps you going, it keeps your juices flowing. Like even though this team isn't in the the postseason hunt, you still feel the fan base, you still feel okay, what's next, what moves are next versus if the A's, they're out in Oakland, it's like, well, we don't know what's next. It's depends on what our owner gives us. It doesn't, we're trying to get a field. Like it's all the same conversation. So here, it's always something new that always keeps you on your toes. And I appreciate and enjoy.
What kind of dog is Cooper? What kind of dog does Billy Beane have?
Huh?
What kind of dog does Billy Beane have?
I forgot. I forgot what's like. But like the weirdest thing was that like he always kept always had a muzzle on him. I'm like, why do you have a muzzle on your dog? He said, oh, because he throws up in the car.
Oof.
I just got a muzzle on. I'm like, dude, so dang, poor dog. Like you have to like just like keep it in his vomit.
Oh, jeez, right? He's got to protect Chris Davis's ankles too if he starts nipping there at the dog.
Exactly, right?
Hey, Julian, I don't want to take up too much of your time. I know you have I know you got stuff to do for the rest of the day, but I did want to ask one last question today. You having the inside scoop, I need to know this. What's Tommy Pham's fantasy football team looking like this year? I know he has Michael Thomas because he said it on Nesson after the game yesterday, but do you have an idea what his roster build looks like this year?
So Michael Thomas, he's obsessed with Michael Thomas.
Like, he likes Slant Boy? He likes
he's like, dude, I need Michael Thomas to have a good year, man. Like he's like the most like Tommy's the man. Like Tommy is the absolute. I don't know what his fan. I'll ask him tomorrow.
Yeah,
I'll get back to you guys on that one. But like,
see if he's on tilt watch after week one. I know Thomas had a good game, but
it's funny, and I hope I'm not putting him out there too much. But Ian Brown from the MLB.com said, man, I got to give Tommy Pham some. I gotta get on Tommy Pham tomorrow, man. He told me Derrick Henry for me to pick up Derrick Henry. Derrick Henry sucked yesterday. But no, like Tommy, as you guys probably know, he's very, very serious about that.
Oh yeah,
yeah. He's like, I think he's like in like five leagues or something like that. And dude, like he says, I said on Sundays, are you gonna like have your iPad like out here on the Sunday games? He's like, during the day games, he's like, hell yeah, I'm having my iPad out here.
He's just chasing at bat pitches because he's pissed that Burrow threw another interception. He's like, damn it! He's got to take it out.
He's an awesome dude, man. Like he's contrary to like I guess like the optics of like him smacking Jock Peterson.
I still can't believe that happened, dude. That's such a.
But when you get to know him, it's like, oh, I could see why this happened. Like you pissed him off. Like I'm a real dude. I feel like you said some sucker stuff. So like, yeah, you're getting smacked. Like that's
gotta check him, right? Yeah.
That you talk to about him, but like, yeah, he's like he gives you time, he gives you information, and like, even like this, like, and he's very, very close with JD. So like, they're like, you hear them in the locker room talk hitting, like, like, oh, JD, he has a cut fastball now that he implemented, and I couldn't get to it because it's such and such and such and such, and like, you just hear them sort of like break down hitting, and it's like really, really goes back to the process, like of the amount of work that these guys put in. They hit in the same group, that group takes forever. Like it's like group one, oh my gosh, it's like they hit for like 30 minutes. One player actually told me, he's like, do you ever see how long group one hits? And I'm like, no. And he's like, check it out for a second. I'm like, oh my gosh.
And once you notice it, yeah,
he's like, yeah, 30 minutes. Like it's crazy how long we're out here taking BP. So, which isn't a bad thing. I mean, that's just their process. But like, it goes back to what we talked about, like just what these guys do to trying to just to compete. And but Tommy is dead serious about his fantasy, man. He's so yeah. So I'll let you know who he has on his team. But
Yeah, I got to take some notes. If he has some flyers that he likes, I might have to pick him up off the waiver wire.
yeah, Derrick Henry didn't work out too well for Ian Brown yesterday.
I got Henry. You could tell Ian that Henry's going to be fine. I've got him in a couple of leagues. Got him in a dynasty one myself. I'm not too concerned. I think he had a slow week one last year, and then he was setting the world on fire up until he got hurt. So Ian's going to be happy with Derrick Henry by year's end, I think.
I'm sure he'll be all right.
Julian McWilliams again of the Globe. If people want to find you, where can they go?
Just my Twitter, I guess. By Julian Mack. I don't tweet that much. I sort of cut back on tweeting a little bit.
Probably for your own benefit, for your own mental health, things like that. We wish we could get off the Bird app, but it's impossible at this point. We're too far in.
Yeah, they pulled you in, huh? Yeah, I was there for a while, but then I was like, I got to get off this thing for a little bit. But like, yeah, my Twitter, I tweet a lot, and then and then BostonGlobe.com/Julian McWilliams, and that's where you can read my stuff. And any reading is any clicks is appreciated.
Again, Julian, thank you very much for taking some time out of your day. We'd love to have you back on. Maybe during the offseason we can kind of go through a checklist of our wants and definitely don't wants for the team and get your inside take on that, man. Appreciate you coming on.
For sure, man. Anytime.
Sure, that's ended.